welcome to the Angry Sun Zone, where today we're going to ask, what's that on your head? Is that a Metroid? Oh, dread. We're going to explore what's in the garage, what game we're building, and we're going to talk about the very next episode of what's that crazy anime shit that Santo's playing. So,
it's a continuing series where
yep.
Santo continues to play strange anime RPGs with weird hooks.
Yep.
Yep. So, without further ado, welcome to the next episode of the Angry Sun Zone.
Aren't you welcoming to the current episode?
This is the part where we do the jingle. Da-na-na-na-na.
It's some motherfucking D-O-double-G.
All right.
Okay, I'm just gonna start. So me and Sean tried playing. Is that the right word? I don't know. We booted up Game Builder Garage because we were trying to figure out how it works, and we thought, get some first impressions, right?
Now, before you continue, listeners and viewers and readers, I'd like you to take a moment to take a bet on whether you think Alex will like this and whether you think I will like this. And tell us on the channel. Tell us. Share your thoughts.
Firstly, let's say what this game is.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not really a game as much as it's a
game studio.
Yeah, it's like a game builder. I mean, it's
a game.
It's a game builder.
It's a game builder that you can do in your garage.
It's a stripped down development environment for simple video games, and it's very much in the vein of things like Super Mario Maker, which is another Nintendo product for making a platformer, a Mario platformer specifically. Or also, if you're familiar with on the PC, things like Game Maker, which is very much similar in that it's very heavily scripting based.
Yep.
And there's these pre-built components like player characters and landscape objects and pre-rendered graphics and things like that. And then you can piece these together, in theory, into a game. I mean, you can. But depending on what kind of game you want to make, well, we'll get into that.
Yeah. So while this has a free form kind of, build your own game, what I should mention is that if you're an adult and not at all a child, you will find that one of the first things it does is actually present you with, it just throws you right into a boss fight. And what is this boss fight? It's the fucking tutorial.
Worst boss fights.
Yeah.
The Game Builder Garage tutorial.
There's approximately 8 to 10 hours of tutorial in this game. You will be happy to know that those are not all mandatory, but the first one absolutely is.
Yes. And let me tell you, when the idea of a tutorial holding your hand comes to mind, Game Builder Garage has a vice grip around your fingers and is gently guiding them to push the right buttons, or else.
Yeah. So the mandatory tutorial is very heavy-handed. It's very it literally prevents you from doing anything other than clicking the exact buttons, and it makes you it explains the most simple way, like, and obvious things repeatedly. And I get it, because obviously the game is aimed at a younger demographic so that children can, make their own game. And that's great. And it's definitely not what we need. We just wanted to go directly into the free development mode. And yeah, it won't let you do that until an hour of tutorial. That is very tedious.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that, like, I haven't played or really even seen anything of this game yet, but that's the kind of thing that makes me wish that Nintendo would just put in an option at the start of the game that's like, I am an adult, or I've played a Pokemon game before, like shit like that, where they put out these games that have these insanely long, and if you played games before, incredibly boring tutorials that I just wish you were able to skip.
Yeah, Pokemon's real bad for it sometimes too. Just unskippable tutorials endlessly.
Well, on the other hand, at least if the developers and their people put some work into it, Nintendo's sure to make sure that you get to experience the hard work that they put into it.
Yeah. So anyway, most of our time with the game, honestly, was spent in the unskippable tutorial.
Yep.
So far, and then we had this concept that we were going to try and do some sort of turn-based or unit-based top-down game, and so we're trying. My thinking was to try and create some logic to like move other pieces around a board. We failed.
To put it bluntly.
Well, that's why there's another 8 hours to tutorials, right?
Yeah. It's the way that you're supposed to do logic is basically there are inputs and outputs on certain logical blocks, essentially, and you have to tie these logic blocks together in ways that then triggers other blocks, right? So what I was trying to do was trigger a block that turns on when there is a thing inside it, a specific object in the area that this logic block is, and then that gets changed to another block that is supposed to be turning on sort of a grab function that it doesn't grab per se, it just causes a force to be exerted on the object towards the center of, I set it to center, towards the center of this other logical block. And these logical blocks they're just sort of areas of space that trigger and exert actions. And then you can attach those to actual movable objects like the player character and things like that. And, we tried to use like a UFO character ship as sort of cursor to move other people around. And that
experience swiftly left us cursing.
Yeah, it didn't really work. It seemed like it should work, but it didn't. I don't know. It's weird. That's all I'll say. And I think it's really designed for particular genres. If you want to make a platforming game, it's fine. It's actually very easy to make a platforming game in it. If you want to make actually any side-scrolling game, probably is...
Yeah, like a shoot 'em up or something?
Yeah, would be quite easy. Yeah. Or at least, like, intuitive as to how you're supposed to go about it. As soon as you're getting into anything that requires state, that's where I think it's gonna be a bit of a mess. So if you're trying to...
Yeah.
If you're trying to like maintain state in anything other than actual objects in the world, it's gonna be challenging, because it's essentially like event-driven programming where you can't define events other than in terms of physical objects in space, which I'm sure there's workarounds. Like they've got logical blocks that do logical operators like math functions and stuff like that, and logic functions. So like you can program, there is actual programming blocks in there. It's just, I can't imagine trying to program like a turn-based game in it. It seems like a nightmare.
That seems like a challenge.
It is a challenge. That's 100% sure. If we manage to do it,
Yep.
it's a real impressive.
Yeah, you know what I think about it? So previously, way back in the day, one of my earliest experiences, or one of my coolest early experiences was actually Game Maker Studio.
Yeah,
and
we used that a bit in high school.
Yeah, so back then...
Fun fact, actually, I was playing with Game Maker Studio in my AutoCAD class because I had finished all of the assignments early.
Yep.
And everyone else was like, "Oh, what's Alex doing? What is he making? Like what is this?" And it became, everyone was so intrigued that everyone else stopped working on their actual AutoCAD projects and just started trying to use Game Maker. And the instructor was like, "God damn it. What are you doing? What have you done?" But actually, it ended up being kind of a good thing in a way, because then, given how interested people were in this, the other class, our sort of information technology class, Infotech, which was sort of generic, various computer skills, kind of all over the place. Mm-hmm. In terms of what they were covering.
They had a sudden bright idea.
But the teacher actually incorporated Game Maker into the information technology class because obviously a lot of people actually wanted to try and make games in it. And so I got that added to the curriculum just by slacking off.
Yep. And you know what? What's interesting is even back then, getting the knack of how to make games in that. When I look at Game Builder Garage today, I feel like I must be very, very rusty, but I can feel some of the same like brain processes, that I used back then to. Let's see. I built an interesting asteroids game. I built a mashup of the original Donkey Kong and Tetris, where blocks would fall from the sky, threatening to squish Mario's head. There's a few different concepts that were relatively easy to do with the sprites back then. Well, I feel like Game Maker Studio, you had more responsibilities, but also more power, just being a PC game that was not trying.
Yeah, with Game Maker, you could literally write action script.
Yeah, Game Maker had a full-fledged scripting language, but it was basically just a programming language built into it.
Yeah, so will this game help you become the next great game developer, on Nintendo Switch? Maybe not, but can you do some really cool, fun, quirky little experiments? And especially, if you're the kind of listener who, has kids and and they enjoy video games and you want to show them something cool that can let their creative side flow. You know what? Game Builder Garage, I would give it a thumbs up for that. If you look at the target market of who it's trying to reach, I would expect that a lot of fun could be had there, because it's the concepts are simplified, but once you get the hang of it, I'm sure you can do lots with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's introducing programming concepts to kids nowadays is becoming extremely popular. Like, my mom works at a school, and she's working with some grade 1 students who are doing some rudimentary, logic programming little games in the curriculum. So, there's been a lot of effort to get, people programming, people thinking about that as a career path. And that didn't necessarily exist all that as much when I was in high school. I didn't decide to become a programmer until a few years into college when I was doing something else.
Nah, see, when we were in high school, you needed to dive deep into the bowels of your operating system to get networking functional.
Oh my god.
Just to play internet games.
Yep. we had a different set of skills.
Yeah.
A different set of skills, indeed.
Yeah, and actually, that's another thing. So the actual aesthetic of this game it's very much meant to look like a child's toy box, like a toddler's toy box. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. They're trying to appeal very, very much to that younger children demographic.
It has a little bit of a Nintendo Land vibe to it. For example, a lot of the programming elements, they'll talk to you and they'll have emoji-like characters to them, like hilarious faces. A lot of the buttons seem strangely angry, or as your girlfriend put it, determined.
Yeah. Well, I thought they were angry. My girlfriend thought they were mischievous.
Yes.
Yeah. And then they call it. One of the funny things is that, so if you know anything about actual programming languages that are object oriented, a lot of GUI libraries use a system of nodes and trees to organize GUI elements, and they've actually they named almost all of the elements nodons.
Yep.
So they're just nodes, but cute. It's kind of funny.
So,
But I don't. But a kid wouldn't realize that like the term nodon actually is just because it's related to nodes on like tree-based graphical interface organizational schemes. But if they go on later to learn more about programming, they might realize, oh, I know exactly what this is. So as a learning tool, I think it's got a lot of potential for for kids trying to learn a bit more about how programming works.
yeah, that's cool. Because I've used a couple of those, like, there's a name for them. Like, I don't think this is correct, but like human interface programming languages, or like fifth level program. There's some weird name for them, but I've used like Scratch and Construct 2, and both of those are terrible. Like, in terms of just like how the performance of them is bad. Like, you just can't do anything like not like the performance of the games that you make, that's also bad, but just like the performance of the tools themselves are just abysmal.
Oh,
so
no.
Considering this is a Nintendo product, I'm assuming it's like very polished, very snappy.
Oh yeah. I mean,
that's
the
good.
only real problem is that you're using a controller to interact with something that would be definitely easier with a mouse.
Well, it's on Switch. Can you use the touchscreen?
I mean, we could have, but we plugged it in
We
a
were
way that we could record.
absolute fools.
Yeah.
Also, it had to be plugged into the base for recording purposes.
Yeah.
Oh, right, of course. Yes.
So yeah, probably we were doing it all wrong.
Perhaps.
Fundamentally.
In fact, disregard everything we said. We don't know what we're talking about. We played the game for like 10 or 15 minutes, other than a tutorial. These are the first of first impressions here.
Did you have a chance to play any games that anybody else had created? Are there like examples?
It was extremely... Actually, the menus were really bad. That's one thing, because I don't know...
I didn't see anything.
I didn't see anything
to
for
check out other people's games.
I didn't see anything for that. Like, it was very minimal. I have a feeling that some of the stuff unlocks as you complete the tutorials. Because the free programming mode wasn't even unlocked until we did the first tutorial. Mm-hmm. The only menu option was start tutorial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, that's the biggest... my biggest beef with it is really just that you can't just jump right into it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Nintendo kind of did that with Mario Maker as well, where you only get there's 7 or 8 rows of different tools that you can use, but you only start with 2 of them, and you have to check in once a day to unlock a new row of tools.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. And they also did, even with Smash, which, I mean, I liked that they did this. They kept the character count when you first get Smash Ultimate to very small, and then you unlock as you go.
Yeah.
And because how we did it, we got, a bunch of friends together and played it so that when, when somebody won, there might be a new character that pops up, and the person that won needs to be that character. And then that creates, fun stories, like how Dr. Mario kept pushing our shit in.
Yeah.
But, imagine being a tournament organizer and realizing that you need more Smash Ultimate kiosks at your place. Then you gotta track down fully unlocked copies of this game, games that have a full save to have all the characters.
And the save data might not be easily copyable or whatever.
But
Yeah.
it's Nintendo. I highly doubt it would be.
I mean, I know that on the Wii it was quite easy because it was literally just raw. Like if you put it on the SD card, it was
Yeah.
you could just copy it straight over to another
Well, you could do
one.
messed up shit with a Wii. Project M is calling.
Yes, it is.
Speaking of projects that start with M, I will finish that with Metroid Dread. So, as a fan of the Metroid series, I was definitely excited to hear about Metroid Dread, having actually seen the reference to it from, what was it, like almost a decade ago?
Yeah.
More than a decade ago?
Yeah, it got teased. It got teased a like a
real long time ago.
really long.
Now, this is unique because...
Quick side note: if you want to see our real-time reaction to that announcement, it is on YouTube.
Yep.
Yes. We did react to that Nintendo Direct.
So, Metroid is... To compare it to another game, I would call it a Castlevania-ish. You're tell me, aren't you?
I mean, Metroidvania is literally
Metroidvania is
the
its
genre
own
term.
genre. So
that term is so stupid.
So-
I hate
so-
it so fucking much.
yeah.
Sorry,
so
I need to go on a tangent about this.
let's take us on this tangent. I love it.
Like, the first few Castlevania games don't have a map. And, like, well, okay, Simon's Quest is a bit weird, but the map is just, like, literally going left to right and shit. But, like, it took until, like, Symphony of the Night or whatever for Castlevania to become like a Metroid. So, I don't like that they're called Metroidvanias.
That's funny.
Also, I think that Nintendo and Konami should collaborate and make a game called Metroidvania just to screw everybody.
Oh,
Now you
my
can't put
God.
that shit in your descriptions on Steam.
that would
Because
be
Nintendo would throw a fucking
hilarious.
fit.
That'd be really funny. So, with Metroid, the series kind of has two radically different experiences depending on which games you play. There's the Prime series, which are... Well, actually, no. There's the side-scrolling traditional series, where you've got a whole world that's kind of laid out, and you're slowly unlocking items that allow you to explore, like push your exploration. So the environment itself...
I mean, that's the same for Prime.
but
Prime is
Prime is in 3D.
3D, yeah.
So, you know, and these games came out on the first one came out on the Super Nintendo? No.
NES.
The Nintendo.
Yeah.
And
the 2D, the
so,
2D ones were first on the NES.
So, you know, they go a long way back and have seen their graphical evolutions, and also, I think they've been on almost every console except for the N64. There was no Metroid game.
And Wii U, there was no Metroid game.
And the Wii
Yeah.
U. So all along the way, you know, Metroid's been a pretty consistent series on the Nintendo. And then they had their Prime series where they went from 2D to 3D, and they did a really good job with the first Metroid Prime. Everything from the music to the atmosphere to everything else of that game was superb. Now, Metroid Dread is the first 2.5D Metroid. No, I actually can't call it the first. There's
I would
other
not say that.
but it is the first. You know what? I'll say
If you don't travel into, do you go into the background at any point? Is there any kind of like forward backwards? That is not 2.5D. I'm sorry.
Fair enough.
I'm putting my foot down.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
But it is a 3D polygonal game seen at a side-scrolling 2D perspective.
yeah, it's kind of like is Guilty Gear Xrd a 2.5D game? No,
No?
it's rendered in 3D though.
Yeah. That's crazy.
What I'll say though is that so you're not really interacting with the third dimension in any meaningful way for the most part, but the atmosphere that they've done now that they have that third dimension is done really well. So for example,
So like something that I find in terms of the difference between say the Prime games and Super Metroid is the atmosphere, right?
Yeah.
The atmosphere feels very different because, you know, you're talking about a 2D sprite-based game versus a 3D game. And they both have great, like, both styles have great atmosphere, but it's very different.
yeah.
And so I'm curious what you think, do you think it matches the atmosphere more of the like visually, aesthetically, more of the atmosphere of the Prime games, or more of the atmosphere of like Metroid, Super Metroid, and Zero Mission? Those
I would say it's definitely closer to the Zero Mission and Fusion. I would say that Fusion is the biggest influence on this game, partly because of, as the title namesake, Dread. So what you'll find, so for example,
and
in the background art...
For those of you who don't know, Fusion was the direct predecessor, essentially. Yes. Both in the timeline, and it was the...
it was where
the
Dread
last
was first
mainstream... It was it was the last mainline title.
Yeah, because when they revealed Metroid Dread, they initially said on the screen Metroid 5. And
Fusion is Metroid 4.
And when you boot up, Super Metroid, it doesn't say Super Metroid, it says Metroid 3.
Yeah. And it's not, and the numbering scheme's totally messed up now because it doesn't actually, Super Metroid was the third Metroid game, but Metroid Fusion was not the fourth Metroid game. And Metroid Dread is not the fifth Metroid game.
Definitely not.
But it's the fourth and the fifth original side-scrolling Metroid game, so...
In terms of chronologically, the main story, that's what the numbering at this point, that's what the numbering system really represents, is the mainline story of the series arc.
So to go back to the atmosphere, so the one thing that does kind of twist it a little bit towards the Prime atmosphere is when you're traveling through, especially through an area for the first time. The background almost part of it is spooky atmosphere. It's like Spooktober, like what is that thing skittering around in the dark, and am I actually going to see it pop out later and interact with me some way? For example, I'm walking through one of these rooms and there's no enemies in it that you can interact with, but there's what looks to be a giant boss being vivisected and operated on in the background, and it. I was wondering whether it would attack me at one point or pop out and be a boss fight all of a sudden. But it just added to, quite frankly, a dreadful atmosphere. Now, the main component, so most of these Metroid games
that reminds me a little bit, the way you described that, of the space pirate boss in Metroid Prime. Because I think you kind of see him a little bit.
Yes.
And you also get some logs about his...
behavior,
experiments,
yes,
and whatnot before you actually fight him.
Yeah. So what's interesting? So this game has some very strange pacing stuff going on. So traditionally, like the Prime games, especially, were very slow. You're exploring, really absorbing the atmosphere, versus the side-scrolling ones where you're progressing quite a bit quicker through the areas and exploring. Now, one of the things that they do that really accelerates stuff is there's enemies that have a lot of health, but every enemy has a counterable attack. Well, almost every enemy. And if you counter it, then your counterattack is lethal to it, and it gives you 5 times the items. So if you master these counterattacks, you're always going to be at near perfect health and near perfect missile count. And if you feel like a badass when you clear a room full of enemies after countering them. It's just, it's great.
It seems like a very dramatic change.
It is very dramatic. Now, the tables all of a sudden get turned when you go through these entire zones. So these zones span many screens across, and inside is these nigh invulnerable robots that have one mission: to find you and end the fucking game with their... I am going to kill you in one hit scene. They'll grab you and they will absolutely just murder you.
Are these the same robots from the reveal trailer?
Yes, the Emmys.
Yeah.
And
the portal GLaDOS, evil GLaDOS on steroids.
Yes, and there's multiple of these, and every time you beat one, the next one you encounter will have more abilities, or at least an ability that's going to make it the next encounter even sweatier. So, what's interesting is most of the game is, methodical. Okay, is there a secret in the room? Is there, is there an item in the room? How do I get to the next room? But then when you get to these sections, it's, oh my god, my heart's pounding out of my chest. I need to get out of this fucking zone because this thing is chasing me down relentlessly. And eventually you get some tools that give you some wiggle room, like the ability to cloak and avoid detection, or the ability to create some distance between you and this thing. And then eventually you'll find what is pretty cool is there's these mini bosses that are a total throwback to Mother Brain. Just everything about them, and then you suck their brain juices out of their corpse, and it powers up your gun. And then, but now the cool thing is that when you use this gun, it's one of the very few times when it shifts from being like head on to shoulder camera behind Samus, and you can see very far. In fact, like through the room that you're in and into the next room if the door's open. So this gives you enough time to prepare your ultimate counterattack against these Emmys, and melt their faceplate off, and then the next thing, and it's quite comical because it really is really freaky, you're charging up a Dragon Ball Z style Kamehameha, like super beam. However, this thing is also marching at you with a very determined, agenda to just rip your fucking face off.
So Samus's final smash from Smash Bros. Is finally actually in a Metroid game.
That's right. Yes.
Because they just made that up.
Yeah.
No. Clearly they had something in mind when they were doing that, and so and then you steal the Emmy's abilities and then can wreak even more havoc. So it is definitely super fun. That actually just makes me comment on one thing. So there's 3 types of enemies. There's your bog standard regular enemies, and then there's your mini boss / bosses. Now, the mini bosses and bosses are very different than your normal enemies because there's no fucking counters, and they're very punishing. Like the first time that you encounter a mini boss or a boss, unless you're truly on your A game, you're probably gonna die to them.
I mean, that's classic Metroid, to be honest.
Yeah. Now, I've actually seen some videos online of what happens when you play in hard mode, and you can literally get one-shotted by a lot of the bosses. So
I'm glad that they didn't shy away from Metroid being a difficult franchise, though.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because Metroid's never been an easy franchise. The first Metroid, frankly, is a total, on the actual NES, total pain in the ass.
Yeah.
The remake, Zero Mission, gives you a proper mini-map and things like that let you actually understand, like, where you are in the world. So that helped. But it's still a challenging game that you need to have, like, some good platforming and kind of dodge your enemies' attacks and, kind of just pay attention, right?
Yeah.
And then, same thing, Super Metroid, right? It's challenging. You die in those boss fights. Kraid in Super Metroid, I probably took me like 10 times to beat him when I first played that game. And, the Prime series, wow. A lot of the boss fights in the Prime series are also just tough. They're tough fights.
Very much so, yeah.
You have to be going in strong, and then you have to know the boss, and you have to watch that you don't run out of, a weapon that they're weak to or something.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they didn't shy away from that, because definitely some of the other series that Nintendo has, it feels like they've been trying to avoid making their games too hard, especially with the Mario games.
More than avoid making it too hard, they just avoid difficulty in general. Like,
Well, and even when they have challenge, they put in a bunch of things where you can skip it, right? Like in some of the more recent, like, Mario platforming games, they add in but they add in like invulnerable power-ups, like a super cloud or a super P cloud thing, like in Super Mario 3D World, that, like, if you fail too much, the game just gives you this ridiculous item that lets you, like, fly and be invulnerable for a time or something. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And so there is no like, they're removing the challenge unless you explicitly try and, like, prevent yourself from taking the handouts that it tries to give you. And so I'm glad that they're, like, with Metroid, just keeping it as a difficult franchise because it's supposed to be. You're on an oppressive alien world.
I actually have a comment about that. So, what's interesting is, so one of the common features of the Metroid games is that it's got guardrails in that you have to, or, you know, if you're playing it ordinarily, you're going to unlock the same things in the same order every time you play the game. But you can break the sequence of upgrades that you get, and when you break that, all of a sudden you have the ability to explore areas earlier than you were ever supposed to get access to them, grab items that you never were supposed to have access to. Traditionally, the video game designers, I suppose that it was just a thought in their mind, you know, as they were designing it. Oh, okay, you know, let's make sure that the game, you know, doesn't end up in an unrecoverable or unproceedable state should people try to do that. And they've been successful at that. Now, what's really interesting is that in Dread, the developers have actually, they've included, like, semi-breaking the fourth wall-ish, like, you know, if you sequence break, they have entirely different cutscenes and ways to beat bosses and other stuff. But to get there,
Yeah,
you
is
need...
it even sequence breaking at that point, or is it just... Here's the other way you could go through the game.
It requires... now, it really rewards you for responding to challenge, because in order to sequence break, you need to have mastery over certain mechanics that are never explicitly explained or trained in the game. So, for example, you know, you'd need a pixel-perfect jump in order to make it in there, and then, you know, failure for that jump is death. And in fact, there's several of those. So, and generally, the sequence breaks aren't necessarily a combat-focused thing. However, with Metroid Dread, sometimes you have to perform these sequence-breaking activities in an Emmy zone, where you're being relentlessly hunted. And that just throws a whole new loop into it and makes it even more challenging. And what's interesting as well is that there's different branches of sequence breaks. Like, you can break the same sequence in multiple different ways, and still come to the same, you know, end result of unlocking that extra cutscene or beating the boss in a different way. But depending on which items you picked up along the way, that opens up different avenues for you to go. Now, one of the downsides is if you somehow decide to do this on your first run like me, you may be a little bit confused because the guardrails have been broken a little bit, and you may not be as sure about where you need to go next. So to counter that, I find that I'll take a break from the actual action of the game every now and then, and I'll just stare at the map. And they have some great features within the map that let you flag certain types of items that are only interactable, or certain types of level features that are only interactable with certain items that you've picked up. You can drop a marker, several different kinds of markers actually, and tag certain items that you'd want to come back to later, or areas you want to avoid, or areas you want to explore, and it's great. I think they've done a great job of making the map an actual feature that, you know, you're not just... When you go in there, you're not just doing it to alleviate the question of where do I go next. You can get a lot more out of it in terms of planning out how you're going to upgrade your character, and also just be able to defeat some of the characters like the Emmys and stuff. Yeah. So I'll conclude this by saying that of my experiences so far, I really like Metroid Dread. If you're a fan of the Metroid series, I highly recommend it. It is definitely friendly enough that if you haven't played any Metroid games before, you could try it, and you'll have a good time. And I would probably rank it. It's very hard to beat the first Prime, and so I wouldn't rank it as high as the first Metroid Prime, but it is very, very solidly up there in terms of, like, it's one of the best side-scrolling Metroids that I've ever played, for sure. They've done very well with the 3D experience that you have compared to, you know, the flat 2D graphics that they've had before.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Eventually I'll buy a Switch and have to play it.
Eventually.
Considering the price of a lot of games on the Switch, maybe I'll sell you my Switch. Make this thing work for me. As far as what I've been playing, the next game on the Santo dumbass RPG train is Vesteria Saga 1, War of the Scions. Now, okay.
Vesteria Saga 1.
Yes.
But there is no 2, is there?
Not yet. So, very ambitious of the developers to stake their claim and say this is the first of a series.
Yeah.
This reminds me of old Japanese game development where stuff like Ogre Battle and Shenmue were like, yes, these are, 8 or 13-part series and this is the first one we put out. It's like, this will never get finished, and they never did.
I mean, at least, there is a precedent of at least the opposite direction working out very well. Final Fantasy was actually supposed to be
the last one.
The last one. The first Final Fantasy was actually supposed to be the end of.
Yeah, it's just like, all right, Square, we're done making games. No more. Nope.
Little did they know.
And there's a very good reason why this reminds me of old Japanese game development, and that's the director, which I'll get to in a second. But okay, stop me if you've heard this before. I
have heard the word A before.
God damn it. A royal is displaced from his kingdom from an invading force, and he has dumb colored hair. And so he needs to, over the course of many different encounters with brigands and bandits, raise an army to take back their homeland in turn-based battles with permadeath and random stat upgrades when you level up.
Okay, until the permadeath and random stat upgrades, I was gonna make a joke that we talked about Wargroove like a couple months ago.
Well,
but it's a very, but also some Fire Emblem games.
Yeah, that's because this is directed by Shozo Kaga, who directed the first 5 Fire Emblem games.
Ah, well, perfect.
Huh.
And started his own company, made a game called Tearing Saga, which was so similar to Fire Emblem that Nintendo sued them, and they had to pay a fine.
Wow.
Retired after a while, and then just showed up and said, yo, I'm making another one of these things.
Well, I mean, at this point, that's a weird loss. That seems like a weird lawsuit to me, because if you don't use art, as long as you're not stealing the art assets or characters or stuff like that, you can entirely make like rip-offs in terms of it's the exact same mechanics in games without.
Well, I mean, I don't know. A, I haven't played or seen Tearing Saga, so I don't know how similar it is, and B, I don't know Japanese copyright law.
Yeah, it might be something weird about Japanese law specifically.
But I digress.
Interesting.
This game is Fire Emblem.
Okay.
It's just Fire Emblem.
Is it like better than the more recent Fire Emblem entries?
It's difficult to say.
Because it's Fire Emblem.
Because, yeah, okay, this is old. Here's the thing.
How old is this game?
This game came out in 2019.
Okay, so it's pretty recent still.
Yeah, it was announced in 2015.
Oh, okay.
That's going to make a lot of what I'm going to say later on not make sense, but...
Sorry, interesting. Okay.
Well, okay. So, the very early Fire Emblem games, 1 through 5, these are the ones that are on the NES and the Super Nintendo, are, like, that's one era of Fire Emblem. Then you get to the GBA and GameCube and Wii game, that's another era. Then you got a couple remakes, which nobody cares about, and one of them wasn't even released North America side. And then you've got the waifu era. So these games, and now I think that the GBA and GameCube era, that was the golden era of Fire Emblem. That everything was firing on all cylinders. Those games were super polished, super tight playing. I cared about the characters and the story. The older Fire Emblem games, they show their age a lot.
I've played. I think it was supposed to be. Was 3 on the SNES?
Oh, I forget.
Yeah.
Because 3 was a weird, like... It was a sequel to 1, and I don't know.
What?
Yeah, I can't remember which one it was, but I tried playing one of the SNES ones, and it was... Frankly, I don't think I beat the second mission.
Yeah.
Because the game was so punishing. So punishing.
Yeah, that was probably Fire Emblem 5.
It might have been 5.
That game is bananas.
Oh, it was probably 5 then.
But...
Actually,
anyways.
I was actually thinking it was 3 or 5.
Yeah.
And, no, it's probably 5.
So, those older games, they have a certain, like, the game design just isn't tight. The maps are gigantic, and, like, in Vesteria Saga, the maps are also just gigantic, but there's, like, large portions of the map where there's kind of nothing. So it doesn't really make good use of the space. It's just like more shit to scroll around on that is like just annoying.
You know, I'm just looking at some gameplay screenshots right now, and I'm really seeing what you're saying already. Just a lot of empty space, a lot of space that's just unused. That's very samey.
Yeah,
almost.
Right.
Like a mountain range that's
the second map that you're looking at right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it's huge. There's no reason for it to be that big. And at least it seems to have old Fire Emblem concepts of splitting up your troops to go to multiple objectives. That's good.
Oh, yeah. And then I was also going to say that this is very much like a SNES era.
Well,
like it looks like a SNES RPG.
Well, here's the thing. The game... It seems like it was made in fucking RPG Maker or something. It's so ridiculously unpolished from a visual standpoint, from a menu standpoint, from an animation standpoint.
Like I was going to say, actually, just looking at some screenshots, it looks like a really generic SNES era RPG. Not like a good SNES RPG.
Yeah, there was this game, I forget the name of it, but it was like a free game.
Like Chrono Trigger looks beautiful. These screenshots don't.
Huh.
Yeah, and like I said, like the menus are completely unpolished as well. Like the flow isn't there. A lot of that doesn't make sense because like I know that he didn't really work on the more modern, snappier Fire Emblem games, but you could have at least looked at those and said like, oh, here's how you do a really good menu for trading items between units. But in this one, it's so clunky.
Well, and just again, I'm looking at this, and the thing that stands out to me about the menu in this screenshot is that it doesn't match at all. Like the visual style is that of like a smooth gradient, and against the pixelated.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying why it looks like it was made
RPG like aesthetic. It looks really weird.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I say it looks like it was made in RPG Maker or like a visual novel engine or something.
Yeah, this totally looks like a visual novel engine, to be honest. Like the style of the menus specifically, which is that and that's not a compliment.
So yeah, like the gameplay is just Fire Emblem. Like it has pretty much the same exact stats as Fire Emblem. The leveling up system is the exact same. There's promoted units and like base units. There's a bunch of different weapons. It doesn't seem like there's a weapon triangle though, which sucks. One good thing about it is that there is a huge variety in weapons. Like in Fire Emblem, there's like the very standard like your base level lance, your like second tier lance, your third tier lance. Those jumps are fairly like they're substantial in quality between them. In this, there's a lot of weapons that are just like have very slight stat differences. So if you really want to get technical about it and match exactly what you want for any given situation, there is that there. Like the core tactical gameplay of this game is just as solid as any of the good Fire Emblem games. That's not really the problem with it. But just the fact that it's so bloody unpolished just makes me not want to play it. I've played like about 4 missions, and I don't know if I'm going to go back to it, because I'm like, I could just play, Fire Emblem 7 again and have a better time.
You know what? Huh.
And and another thing that harkens back to very old Fire Emblem games is that on the level that I stopped at, there's a really just like stupidly punishing sequence that it doesn't really communicate to you, where you go to this house and they're just like, oh, these guys stole this like statue from me. Not like statue, but like this like little religious icon or whatever from me. Go to their cave and get it back. And there's a cave, and then there's a few people there that are not allied troops, but just like NPC troops. They're not aggroed towards you. So you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna go get that back. Why not, right? As soon as you cross like a little bridge to get close to them, they all aggro you all at once. There's one unit in particular that's like super powerful that just like ran up and just like one rounded one of my guys, killed them. I'm like, well, what the fuck is going on here? And turns out that's a character that you're supposed to recruit like way later on in the mission, but this sequence happens right near your initial deployment spot, so you're gonna do it right away. You're not gonna wait until the time comes where you might get the information that says, hey, maybe don't engage these people yet. So it's I don't want to be too harsh to like the director that created Fire Emblem basically, but he should have stayed retired.
Yeah. I wonder too if it might be one of those situations where a director of a beloved franchise maybe got too much creative control and made Jar Jar Binks.
Oh my God.
No one was willing to say no. The game shouldn't look like an RPG Maker special.
Like the combat animations look worse than the Super Nintendo games.
Wow.
That's how bad this thing is. They're like the walk cycle is 2 frames for the character walking from one entire side of the screen to the other side to hit a dude with an axe, which is also like 2 frames.
Yeah. So it's funny. Okay, so these are some screenshots from a game made in RPG Maker, and it literally looks so close. Like it's practically the same style of art.
Yeah, except with a better looking dialogue box.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't recommend this game. Well, okay, if you're really pining for old style, like 1 through 5 style Fire Emblem, and are okay with dealing with a bunch of really like bad jank.
I mean, to be
then
fair,
sure.
which if you played the 1 through 5 Fire Emblems are
You're used
also
to.
filled with bad jank.
You're used to that at that point. Like, yeah, this, I'd give it a look. It's pretty cheap. It's on Steam. Sure.
Yeah.
But as for me,
Play Fire Emblem 7.
yeah, I might just do that or move on to something else.
Play more XCOM mods.
No.
I didn't realize, as someone who has who's at least tried a Fire Emblem game but has not really ever dug into the series, I did not realize how far back it goes, actually.
Yeah, Fire Emblem is super duper old. It's, it was released fairly early in the NES lifespan, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first Fire Emblem was released before the first Famicom Wars.
Because the first few didn't get released in North America.
The first 6 didn't get released in North America.
Yeah. So it didn't really... Yeah, we forget how old they are. It's the same thing with the Advance Wars as well. Because, I think that Advance Wars also dates back to the NES.
Yeah,
it
started with Famicom Wars, and there was Game Boy. There was Game Boy Wars,
Game Boy Wars, and Super Famicom Wars, and then Advance Wars, and then once they got to Advance Wars, where they were just like, nah, okay, now it's Advance Wars because it was actually popular. Or,
Yeah, it's just like they it wasn't DS. Well, it was Advance Wars Dual Strike
actually,
DS.
To be fair,
And then Days of Ruins just threw the naming convention out the window.
Yeah. To be fair, I think also some people, because they had another game that was sort of supposed to be in the series,
Battalion Wars.
Battalion Wars, and everyone lost it about the name. They're like, "Why would you name it this or something?"
Why isn't it GameCube Wars?
Yeah, a lot of people were upset about the name. And,
that game was rough.
yeah. Anyway, so I think they just decided that something resembling a brand would be more useful than changing the name every console.
Yep.
That's how the collective intelligence and leadership on a team when they really love games but haven't necessarily thought about other things like the marketing and.
Although one thing which I will say is that the pipeline train from Super Famicom Wars is amazing. It is absolutely incredible. It's so stupid, but I love it.
Yeah, some of those earlier like Famicom and Game Boy Wars games had really crazy, like, more in-depth mechanics than the newer ones.
Yeah, they had some weird stuff going on, and I love some of it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we used to frequent an Advance Wars forum, and I remember there was one guy who would not shut up about Game Boy Wars 3 and how it was so much better.
Yes.
All the new ones.
Would that be the Advance Wars by web?
That had a forum, right?
That had a forum too.
Yep.
Yeah, but Advance Wars Net, which sadly I think is dead.
It's died several times.
Yeah. But good memories of internet forums. Remember those?
Oh yeah. Yeah, before everything got homogenized into Reddit.
Yep.
And Facebook and Twitter.
Yep.
Speaking of Twitter, you can contact us at Angry Sunzone on Twitter, and also email us at, angrysunzone@outlook.com. You can get in touch with us.
Yeah, you can
reminisce about the old days.
You can watch our YouTube videos and comment us there. And we hope you had a wonderful time hearing about this shit we've been playing.
Have yourselves a fantastic day, everybody.